Ending a match like that was unsatisfying, to say the least. Kent's heel ever so slightly brushed the painted line at the edge of the arena, which counted as a down, and because he'd been down twice already, he was out. It stung particularly bad because he had his opponent on the ropes. The third down was in his grasp. But alas, it was not to be. 10 tournaments, 10 losses. What was one more? The red elixir slid down his throat, and a moment passed before it kicked in. Once it did though, a warm, pleasant wave spread throughout his body, anesthetizing the pain and giving him a feeling that he was floating somewhere above himself. That feeling abruptly ended a few seconds later, as his consciousness snapped back to clarity. He was energized, his broken leg was whole again, and it felt like the last 45 minutes of combat had never happened. He got to his feet, lifted his greatsword, and charged back into the battlefield. Callista found her way up a small hill to better see the battlefield and get a sense of its scale. The dead numbered in the tens of thousands, and the ground beneath them was churned and roiled. An impossible number of crows and corvids circled above, overhead, apparently being picky about which corpse to try for dinner. It was such a waste. She would pick through the fallen and find the best of them to return to the fight. Theron was alone here. The town had been completely enveloped in the red mist, and the townfolk who were still alive were paranoid, manic, and bloodthirsty. He had only recently recovered, and his right leg was still incredibly stiff. He needed to leave before they found him and overwhelmed him. His faith gave him strength against the corruption whispering in his mind, but his body was what had to deal with the threat outside the door. He steeled himself before flinging it open and rushing into the square. He left behind the corpse of the cleric who had spent so much time carefully tending to his wounds before he attempted to cave Theron's head in with a mace. The red mist had no mercy. The group tests were designed to be difficult, and the group seemed to be organized so as to maximize that difficulty. Ashlar's group was comprised of 3 others who, like him, specialized in conjuring and controlling the elements. Their project, however, was to create a new spell that could tell the future in some form, and none of them had experience in the ocular arts. After many months of agonizing study, experimentation, and failure, they were able to pull a small amount of their favorite element from a few moments in the future, and then examine the strands of essence, suffusing it to glean information about what was about to happen. Comrades in arms, that's what they were. They had to remember that. In the face of corruption, the training of the Grim Guard had adapted to mitigate its effects. This meant a focus on teamwork, the value of others in their squad, and the unbreakable bonds forged through combat. Though physical training was important, this mental training was the only thing that truly mattered when venturing into the red mists. Being able to swing a greatsword meant worse than nothing when the one wielding it had turned on their fellows. Treasure hunters loved to tell stories about the cenotaph of Poe. These stories always start with how the hunter knows someone who has found it. Often they finish the story by offering a map of the cenotaph for some incredibly low price, given what is said to be stored there. The map invariably leads to a place that is not the cenotaph, which may be for the best. The cenotaph doesn't just hold the bodies and the treasure that belong to the cohort of Poe, but it also is a seal which prevents darker things from entering this world. In this episode, we learned more about the Red Mist that turned brother against brother and destroyed the planet. What will we learn about next week? Subscribe below.